So my name is David Meyers. I'm the Executive Director of the Conservation Finance Alliance. And we have a clicker. There's a few slides, yeah. But before I start talking a bit about the first round and some lessons learned and a bit about what we're planning for the second round, I'd like to introduce Thierry Renaud from the MAVA Foundation, who's a great supporter of the incubator. And Thierry.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it's great to be here in the Congress and to see all these sessions that we have about conservation finance, how to finance conservation. It reminds me of a time not so long ago in nature, but talking money was not on the agenda. So thanks to CFA and many others, now we are having these very important discussions and having put a finger on the funding gaps that we have. So we're still not there yet in terms of funding nature conservation. Lots of things need to be done, and we've discussed throughout the day, and we'll continue to discuss all the different types of mechanisms that we can use to bridge the gap, from trust funds, from entrepreneurship, of course, and that's the goal here, but also very local mechanism in marine protected areas that we've discussed a few minutes ago with the blue seeds in the Mediterranean. At MAVA, we are very conscious of this need of funding conservation and having sustainable and stable funding sources for nature conservation. I think every donor should have this as a priority, but because MAVA is ending all of its funding in a few years, we really felt this pressure more than any other donor. So we're very happy to be here and see the sector bubbling and all the solutions emerging. MAVA, we have supported several incubators because we have this need for innovation. We have supported incubators for entrepreneurs in circular economy in Switzerland, in rural areas, around the Mediterranean. I mean, there are plenty of incubators around the world, and even there, I think they are not enough. I mean, we can do more. We can generate innovation and focus on all the different steps that the entrepreneurs need, not only on the early stage, but also on the scaling up phases. So do we need yet another incubator? Yes, we do, and especially this one. I think that's a very different one. It really taps into the very unique niche of CFA. CFA being a network of experts, it can provide direct inputs at the ideation stage for the entrepreneur. So that's a very unique model that we have here, and that really magnifies MAVA support, but also other donor support to CFA for the long term. So I'm very happy to hear about the lessons of this first round, and I give the floor again.
Thank you, Thierry. Great, thank you. Yes, we launched the first round of incubation back in, I probably have a timeline here. Actually, maybe I should go through the presentation. This is adapted from a presentation we did with Convergence. So it's relatively short, but I'll speak a little bit longer. But so first was just a bit of background on the CFA. For those who don't know, who haven't been here all day, we're the leading global professional alliance for conservation finance practitioners, experts and organizations. Our mission is to promote awareness, expertise, and innovation in conservation finance globally. And the innovation piece is what we're really focusing on here. We have 4 different working groups and multiple task forces. So if you're not a member and part of that, please join and join one of the working groups. We do research advisory and produce papers and reports, most recently a white paper on conservation finance called Conservation Finance, a Framework. We just last year produced the Conservation Trust Funds 2020, a 10-year review of conservation trust funds. And we released also the update to the practice standards for conservation trust funds. And we've been working recently with the Global Fund for Coral Reefs on their investment plan and implementation. That's a blended finance fund. So the goal of the CFA Incubator is to identify, support, and promote innovative ideas and solutions for conservation finance challenges. So the idea here is to not have an incubator that's just supporting conservation enterprises. There's quite a bit of interest in that. There's work that CPIC we heard of before is doing on that. So we're really focusing on innovation and conservation finance specifically as a field, because we feel that we define conservation finance quite broadly. I'm not sure what it's about. So just in terms of our definition of conservation finance, it's not just raising money to fill the finance gap. It's using finance mechanisms as tools to solve conservation challenges and achieve conservation outcomes. So a lot of it has to do with aligning incentives of the different actors that are either causing harm or that are increasing the cost of conservation. And so we basically are saying, here's all these finance tools, from economic instruments to, enforcement, for example. Think of enforcement of rules and regulations as a finance tool, but it has an impact on the cost of doing business. It has an impact, for example, on illegal forestry activities, illegal fishing, things like that. And so you can't have a good finance mechanism, for example, that uses quotas for fisheries and charges them or tradable quotas if you don't have any kind of enforcement. So we really have to look at conservation finance from a holistic perspective. And a lot of the finance solutions that we're encouraging think of themselves within this holistic framework and try to solve conservation challenges using finance tools. So that's the approach. And so we launched this incubator. Another thing I didn't mention about the CFA is we're sort of a global members organization. So we have now over 1,300 members globally. And these members are sort of the lifeblood of the organization. They contribute their time and energy and share their experiences. So the idea was to sort of tap into this amazing set of knowledge and expertise. And we launched the first round of the incubator back in the end of 2019. We closed it in early 2020. COVID hit, which didn't really affect us very much because the idea was it was going to be a virtual incubator anyway. So, and we were quite surprised. We had 75 different applications, and we figured we'd get maybe 30 or so. Again, our focus is really on conservation finance, not conservation enterprises. Very wide geography, 42 different countries. So our call for proposals was quite broad. Half of them were companies and about half of them were nonprofits. So really interesting mix. And this shows the graphic distribution from Africa through Asia. And so small amount from the Pacific, but otherwise pretty good geographic distribution. So the incubator in the first round was led by myself and Ben Guillon, who's a CFA member and who works in basically conservation finance, conservation investment in the US. For the top 5 proposals, they received a grant of $25,000 each. And then and as well as mentoring. And we also, because we had such a strong group of proposals, we decided to add additional 10 projects on that would get mentorship. So we had a total of 15 projects that were in the incubator, and with only 5 of them receiving financing. The mentors were sourced from the CFA membership, as I mentioned, and we established an incubator support program. We did an online series of sessions over the course of about 6 weeks, where we looked at business model canvas. So like it's a 1-page business plan, sort of strategic planning. We did work on financial modeling and financial statements. We looked at what investors are looking for and how to do a good investor presentation. And then each of the top 5 that received the financing or at least 4 of them, because one is actually still ongoing, did a presentation to the membership, which of course was open to all, that presented their results. So, whoops, we somehow dropped out of this, Kumar, but okay, so so let me tell you a bit about the 5 that were the top proposals here and that received the financing. The first one is Blue Finance, which is had a project looking at, Blue Finance is a non-for-profit that hopefully you'll hear about more later here, that brings impact investing into marine protected area finance. So they basically try to figure out ways to get impact investors to upfront the finance for protected area management, put in place the infrastructure, entrance fees, and other forms of finance that then enable the organization to feed back money to the investor and repay the loan with a return. So interesting way to get money up front. And for the project that they were looking at was trying to figure out a way to get hotels to pay for coastal protection services of coral reefs, to get the hotels to restore the coral reefs in front of their hotels to reduce beach erosion. So through studies, they were able to look at how strategically replanting coral at certain levels resulted in reduction of wave flow, because as you all probably know, coral has this incredible ability to reduce the flow of waves and that's directly causing beach erosion. So so they launched this project, and then COVID hit, and the hotel companies were a little less interested in upfronting money. So what they came up with was a really interesting process where where Blue Finance actually provides the financing up front to do the restoration, and the hotel pays out over time. And they did get interest from the hotels. From a business point of view, it's much easier paying off of your profits than it is to upfront money for anything. So they thought this was really interesting, and there's an added benefit of being a service for tourists, for their clients to go out and see the restoration and go visit the coral as they go. The second project is the Rubber Truss Fund. This is a collaboration between a for-profit company, Halcyon, which is a rubber producing and trading company that produces natural rubber. And they're based in Singapore, and WWF US, the forestry program, which is trying to improve the sustainability of rubber supply chains. And they, that one's still ongoing actually, and they're in the process of establishing a trust fund that would funnel money from some of the largest rubber companies and tire companies and car companies in the world to the mostly outgrowers of sustainable rubber to try to improve their sustainability. This is all natural rubber, which is a vital ingredient for tires. Even petroleum-based tires have a component of natural rubber. So, and the idea here is to, these companies want to be more sustainable. They want to make sure the supply chain is sustainable. And so this is a mechanism that allows them to basically funnel money in a sustainable long-term way to help these outgrowers achieve sustainability. The third one is was interesting, Community Reef and Forest Banks. This is GreenFi, and they are a microfinance focused organization. But what the project that they were working on with us was local village savings and loans, basically, that are tied to the management plan. So they have a system in place that allows them to work with communities, putting in place basically it's like a local credit union where the villagers lend to each other. The money stays in the village. It's a microfinance system, but the money doesn't go back to a microfinance organization. It doesn't go back to investors, although they also work in that space. This was where your credit to borrow is tied to your activities in the community for replanting mangroves, for protecting fisheries, for and those activities were identified through the local community management plans. So they so it's the community that agrees on the management plan, agrees on the actions that everyone takes, and whether you can, how much money you can borrow, basically, and your credit. The interest that you're paying is determined by how much activity you're doing to restore mangroves and protect the forest. So really interesting system, and they're doing pilots in Zanzibar, Rwanda, and other countries, and really have this is, you know, these community savings and loans are used. There's about 17 million of them around the world, and a lot of development organizations use them, but not very much used in conservation. So it's really interesting to see what we can do with that. The fourth one here is Kenya for Life. It's an NGO based in Malaysia called RIMBA, and they're working with the state of on Peninsula Malaysia, and they're looking at a range of ecosystem services, trying to monetize them to help finance protecting about 200,000 hectares in Peninsula Malaysia. This state, Terengganu, I believe is how you pronounce it, is one of the most forested on Peninsula Malaysia. And so there's a big national park that comes right up to it, Ngara National Park. And they're looking into carbon financing. They're looking into the RSPO, the sustainable palm oil offsets, which is a huge opportunity that's coming online. And they have a huge reservoir there that, you know, so there's ecosystem services from payment for ecosystem service from water, but that's government owned. So they're having a hard time trying to get them to accept kind of a water fee to do a PES program. But the state's very supportive of that, and they're doing really well. They'll probably start first with carbon financing because it's hard to get the others to online. And then finally, a company called Natrix, which is working on coastal restoration. So it's green infrastructure. We hear about this a lot. But they have a technology that allows them to basically do 3D printing on site of cement-based products that are designed for attracting oyster colonies and creating a sort of green-gray hybrid infrastructure. And they've been quite successful in the US. And we did the work that we did with them was to come up with a financial model to show how cost effective it is to use their system and use green infrastructure as compared to dumping a whole bunch of rocks out there. And it turned out that with their partners, because their partners are the ones that are doing these big infrastructure projects. And they said, if clients really see how cheap it is, then we'll lose all of our profit. So, but they're in the process of, we introduced them to some investors, and they're in a negotiation now with Sustainable Ocean Fund for an equity investment. So they're doing really well. During the time that they were incubated, they went from like around 50,000 a year in revenue to around 500,000 a year in revenue. So not our doing, but they're it was great to be able to support them and work with them. So those were the 5 big projects. And the 10 others I'm going to tell you about in detail. No, I won't go into them, but I thought I'd share with you these. Let's see, not going to get this to go forward. Kumar, can you help advance that slide? But some of the 10 others, there's still, so some of them were very innovative and idea phase, and we worked with them to try to get them into a real product. And others were ongoing sort of social enterprises that are still doing really well. There's one that works on sort of regenerative agriculture and bringing carbon financing into that to help finance the conversion of conventional to organic and restorative agriculture, and others that track tree plantation, you know, to track tree planting to make sure that they're really planted, things like that. So some of the lessons learned is here. That innovation and conservation finance is occurring globally. There's a lot of creativity going on out there. That the support for the early stage concept development, refining the business model, identifying revenue streams, this was really greatly appreciated. It was something that that almost all the organizations needed help with, even those that were established. Scaling and replication is challenging. A lot of these organizations are small, and to have the impact that we want, you really need to get up to a greater scale. We see there's great opportunities to partner with larger corporations and larger organizations to get that scale quickly. Thank you so much. There's you know, there are a lot of incubators and accelerators out there focusing on social enterprise. We don't see many on nature in general. So although we are focused, as I said, on conservation finance specifically, there's really not a huge amount of support out there to conservation entrepreneurship. And although the TNCs work with an accelerator and others, there's still enormous opportunity and need for this. Now, the model for incubators financially is not strong, so a lot of them are funded through grants and through outside sources of financing. If you have to wait for your investments to produce a return over time, you're going to be waiting 5 years, 10 years, and it's really hard to self-finance. So, anyway, I'll stop there. Just going to go to round 2. We're very excited through support from our financial partners, including MAVA, to be getting ready to launch round 2. And we will do an initial call for concepts later in September. We wanted to be ready today, but we're not quite ready for that call. But what we're going to do is something a little different this time. What we found last time was that a lot of the proposals were good, but could have used a bit more feedback in the early stages. And so what we're going to do is we're going to ask for very short descriptions, short concept notes, and then we're going to provide feedback. We offered in the first round, for those that didn't make the top 15, we offered a feedback session. So we were able to schedule 20 calls with people that didn't get in. And I did basically a one-on-one with them and was able to provide them a lot of interesting feedback. Some organizations we're still in contact with today. They were actually quite good and are doing well. One of them, I think, securing about a $15 million grant from the Alliance for Ocean-Free Plastics or Plastic-Free Oceans or something like that. And they're doing quite well. Others we did webinars with because we thought that was really useful for our membership. So we're gonna provide some feedback on short descriptions with some initial review and feedback, and then we'll request some final proposals later on in the fall. We'll review and we'll choose the top 5 like we did the first time, but we're not going to take on the additional 10, which was stretched us a bit too thin. And we found that although there were some companies and organizations that were already committed to their activities, those that weren't, if they didn't have the financing, it was really hard to get their attention. Also, it was a time of COVID, and I was encouraging people not to quit their day jobs to start a new business at that time. But we're going to limit it to 5 to really focus on those. And we'll still do the mentoring and support for 9 months, and followed by graduation. We're seeking additional partnerships, mentors if you're interested in contributing, and definitely conservation finance entrepreneurs. If you have an idea that you'd like to share, please reach out to us, and pay attention to the newsletter, because we'll announce the call later in September via the newsletter and email. So I'm going to stop there and see if you have questions or ideas that you want to share, and opening the floor up. You can, but if there's anyone online, they won't hear you.
Oh, right.
They won't hear you in the back.
Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Well, thanks for the introduction to CFA. I wasn't familiar, actually. I mean, I heard of you guys, but getting the deep dive is really nice. So my name is Mike McMahon. I'm at the Northwestern University's Institute for Sustainability and Energy in the United States, in the Chicago area. My question is, I mean, obviously a little self-interested, I guess, but how have you guys worked with universities? How do you think about working with universities, whether they be in the U.S. or globally? Because I can think of some really interesting partnership ideas, and I'm curious to hear how you guys think about that sort of interaction, or if you do.
Yeah, no, it's a great suggestion. We have not worked with universities for that first round, but it's a really great idea for next round. We've got some good contacts with Yale, and they have an entrepreneurial group, and we know Duke's also interested in this kind of thing, both from social entrepreneurship and from environment. So yeah, it's a great idea to reach out if you're interested.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do a lot, quite a bit around entrepreneurship, innovation when it comes to sustainability and energy issues, not just locally, but globally too. So maybe we can connect afterwards. I'm curious to learn more.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. We'll grab
Thank
my
you.
card.
Yeah,
Sure.
I will.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Other, yeah. Rena.
Thank you. Rena from Madagascar,
Great. I think I need
from the MAVA Foundation. My question is about maybe I was late, but I just want to, yeah, I just want to know how much is the range of the amount of the fund, and what kind of I don't know, organization or foundation you finance with. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So yes, I didn't mention it. So it's we're going to do 25,000 grants again. 20,000? No. I think yeah. I think I don't remember, but I think somewhere around 20,000 again for the 5 companies. So
okay.
And a for-profit enterprise can apply as well as a nonprofit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question.
It's okay, thank you.
Yeah, it'd be great to get something from Madagascar. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Hi, David. A question. What do you, from your experience with the incubated institution or organization, what was the best insight you had, or from your, based on your experience, what do you think is the most useful to the people you helped, or is it finance support? Is it like the mentoring or general mentoring, or the general, the counseling that you are assisting with developing the business model, for instance? I'm just wondering what's the best, or what's the most useful advice you were giving to the, in general. I mean, I know it's a difficult question, but
yeah, it was each one was slightly different. They're very diverse, right? So the feedback that we got was the sort of most appreciated, probably because it was most impactful, was around strategy and thinking about their revenue sources. And so it was this business model canvas, because they generally, entrepreneurs have an idea, they launch into it, they think it's great, they're passionate about it, but they haven't thought through the details of how they're going to make money, and who they're competing with, and what the client is and what the client wants. And so this one-page business plan is really great. The business model canvas just it focuses it really clearly. And so that, I would say, that's probably the most impactful. The finance was useful, but again, dependent on the organization. So it's interesting because the one that's still ongoing, WWF, they've had this partnership with Halcyon for a while. They, WWF's got money, right? So, but without this incubator, that was just an idea that they had, and it didn't really form into a concrete action plan until they went through the incubator. And so now that could ultimately result in, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, going to sustainable natural rubber production. And, without us pushing them and a little bit of money, which is financing consultancy, maybe they would have done it, maybe it would have dropped off because there's so many competing projects, but they are doing it now, and it's moving forward. So, and Natrix, this one with the green, blue-green infrastructure, we help them out but they were led by someone who's a great business strategist. He'd done multiple businesses already. They had great engineers there. So we just kind of brought some outside thinking, and we inspired them to start to think about alternative financing approaches. And so one of the things that they're exploring is a financial instrument that can help pay for the green part of infrastructure investment. So like clean energy projects, ocean-based wind, they put in all this infrastructure for the electrical lines. And so they're saying they're going to try to raise money to put in, coral based coverages, that because natural protection will regrow, right? Whereas if you're putting cement down there, you have to restore it after a couple of years. And so their idea is they're going to come in at a lower cost and produce the same protection that more traditional gray infrastructure would do, and they can capture that cost savings and make more money. So they're going to bring the money, they want to bring the investment up front rather than try to just compete to get those deals, because the big infrastructure companies, they're all engineers, they're traditional engineers. They don't think about alternative approaches. They don't think about green or blue infrastructure. And so they think there's a lot of money that they can make by upfronting the financing. So quite interesting. Yeah. Thierry.
Yeah, maybe just comments and lessons learned from MAVA from other initiatives. I mean, you mentioned two very important challenges. One is scaling up, and the second one is the link with the social entrepreneurship community. In Switzerland, we have supported incubation of circular economy entrepreneurs. So that's very specific because that's Switzerland and because that's circular economy. And after a couple of rounds of incubation, so supporting very early stage entrepreneurs with the kind of things that you mentioned, just the clear business idea, clear business planning and launch, we found out that the bottleneck is not at the early incubation stage in Switzerland for this context, but later. And how can you ensure that, the valley of death when you have a good idea and a proven business model, but you cannot really scale up? How can you help the entrepreneurs in that stage? And we worked with Impact Hub Switzerland to link these small entrepreneurs with big established companies who need ideas. And that was really powerful. So that might be a scheme to explore for CFA, even though you're spread so broadly in terms of geographies and thematics that it might be hard. But this role of convener between solutions and big initiatives looking for solution is key. And the second lesson is when we started working at MAVA on this social of this biodiversity focused or nature entrepreneurs, we made the grand tour of all the social entrepreneurs incubators. And all of them told us, oh, but we support entrepreneurs working for nature. Look, we have this solar panel facility. We have this low carbon emission, etc. We have, so it was all about carbon, a little bit about agroforestry, and that's it. But I think that over the years, I mean, we've tried to push them more and more, and I think I see that they are moving very slowly, but in the direction of biodiversity. And the fact, just the fact that we have SDGs, that we have commitments not only for climate but also for biodiversity, will help them move in that direction. So I'm quite optimistic that we are not far from reconciling these two agendas.
Thanks. Yeah, great points. And I've seen a lot of, there's a lot of interest in technology around conservation. And I think that, that incubators and venture capitalists, they just want that hockey stick growth potential. And a lot of nature-based businesses are very slow growth type opportunities. And so that's why they're excited about technology. But I think there's the amazing innovation going on in performance-based payments. In the US, there's like new impact bonds for nature and things like that. So there's a lot of innovation going on that could really produce scaled impact. So that's what we're hoping for here too. Yeah. So more questions or thoughts, ideas? Anyone's got an idea? Come on.
I have many ideas, but I don't know. I just maybe I had a comment, and I would like to have your opinion on this. We are currently working on those aspects of bankable companies, bankable nature companies, the session that was before, and now based on your insights, I see two moves in the development of those companies. I see in the hockey stick you are talking about, the startups, what Ben Guillaume, you know, called the biodiversity enablers, which is more like startups model, where basically which is compatible with equity, private equity, which is more compatible with venture capitalism. And basically there is the other category, which is more normal SMEs, low tech business, where it's like this like kind of higher expected returns, and it's more like and it's not basically compatible with like big investment from impact investors. So my question is like, based on your experience, I see the light for startups model, biodiversity enablers, etc. But how do you see the light for those more low tech, more basically green infrastructure sometimes, or more? And I think it's more based on aggregation of those project aggregation, and finding a scale where there is no maybe necessarily a scale there. So I don't know if I was clear, but what's the way forward for this other category, which is not startup compatible?
Right. Yeah. So great question. I think the simple answer is debt. Yeah, debt is much more compatible with, relatively low returns, but sort of predictable. So it's much more aligned with sort of natural resource based revenue streams. Growth is steady. If you can improve fisheries over 3 to 5 years, you're going to make more profit. Those profits are not going to be 20% a year. They're going to be 5-10%. So they're debt level. But the problem is a lot of these smaller businesses that they don't have the assets needed to get debt, and so they don't have the revenue streams to service the debt. So then you say, okay, well then maybe equity, right? But equity investors, they say high risk, high return, and so you have a real incompatibility here. Which is where blended finance comes in. It's a critical solution here. It allows upfront grant funding, for example, for some of the feasibility pieces, the business planning, and then concessional debt where you have, let's say, 3 to 5 years where you don't have to pay any interest and that kind of thing. Aggregation. Microfinance is a form of aggregation in a way, right? The microfinance institution works in a certain area. They're aggregating a lot of high transaction costs that get absorbed because they charge more, or they're getting donations. So could we use that model? I think there's a possibility. We talk about landscape finance, and there's a couple sessions in a couple of days on that. And one idea is sort of landscape finance, landscape development bank, where you create a financial institution at the landscape level that's focused on sustainability, that provides that blend of finance that's compatible with the needs of the organizations that are seeking the financing. So there are structures that you could create. They're not it's not venture capital. It's much more aligned with debt and sort of development finance. But it's something like that is needed, and on a large scale. How do we get there? I don't know. I mean, the big development banks, they need to do huge deals, and then the national development banks, they're starting to think about this, but they're not focused on nature. They're not focused on this. They're focused on jobs and economy, and maybe they'll do some climate work, but generally not even that. So how do we get there from here? I don't know, but open for ideas. Other questions or ideas? Olivier, come on, you gotta have something. Rosa. But then we're gonna end, yeah. So
yeah.
Take a break.
You know, I've been working 20 years on this. You know, just in Madagascar, we have a very good company. You know, bringing income for 6,000 people. You know, but they could not carry on being involved into conservation because they had to make the same margin than the other companies. And this is interesting. If you start something with an idea, which was my idea, to say, okay, let's have a business of essential oil so people get concerned about protecting the environment. But then when you pass the business or you find another investor, you know, they might change. We have to think of this. It has been already raised this morning, you know, just to say, what is going to be the constraint for the company not to be able to change his strategy? This is really key that we have to think right now, you know, just how to do it. And then the other point is the time. You see, when you're a businessman, you have a good idea, you put it on the paper, you have your incubator helping you, but then by the time you get to the funds, it takes 6 months, you see, and your 25,000 are not going to pay for this. So you also have a blockage of this, you know, who are the entrepreneurs? Who could fund, you know, the entrepreneur himself to design the business, to end up to the business plan, etc.
True. Really interesting and a challenge. So great. Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for staying and participating, and suggest, you know, apply for the incubator when it's launched later on this month. Great, thanks.